Yeah, easy testing and development with django-fixtureless. Just as a show of hands, who does not know Django at all? Doesn't? Okay, so new to Django, so about a third of us. Who has not used an MVC style framework before for building web? So third of us. Okay, cool. That's okay, because this talk is actually it comes with a lot of examples, and hopefully I won't lose anybody. So let's first really quickly talk about what an MVC framework is. You kind of need that as a background to understand the motivation behind this. An MVC, what they call Model View Controller Framework, is something that allows you to create data models, and those are mostly used like a database table, you can imagine. There's data that's being stored somewhere. There's a view that's written in code that will extract data from the database, organize it, calculate on it, do whatever it is needed to package and deliver out to the end user through a controller that then determines exactly how that's displayed to the user. Very general terms there is what but to give you an example, you go to Amazon.com, you sign in, and it says, what's your name? Alyssa. So it says, hello, Alyssa, you've got nothing in your shopping cart. It knows everything about you, right? Like, this is something you might be interested in, all those things. A lot of that stuff is ad driven, but the content, how it knew your name, that is through an MVC. The controller went and talked to the view. The view said, oh, this person's logging in. They have this ID, this email address, this password, whatever. Goes to the database, grabs that name, spits it up as a variable, filled out what actually your name is on the actual web page. So that's just the MVC framework. It's used everywhere. Django is a framework in Python that allows you to do just that. So that's just kind of quick what Django is. It's a framework allowing you to build websites. And hold on, I gotta click on to here. Let's try that again. Oh, there's a delay. Okay, so in Django, this is what a data model will look like. The data model, again, drives what the database structure will look like. In Django, it's fairly one-to-one that this will be a database table that will be called Mage. It will have a field called name and a field called magic type. This is a representation of what the field type is going to be in the database. It's a character field. It's got a max length of 40 characters. The magic type is also a character field with a max length of 255. However, Django allows you to provide validation against that to give you certain choices. This website that we're going to look at is actually just going to be a mage and unicorn website where unicorns can be friends with mages. I hope you enjoy. So this is actually very simple. There's a mage. He's got a name. He's got a magic type. There's a unicorn who also has a name. He has an age because unicorns are mythical. They could have ages of who knows how long. But they also have a best friend who's a mage. You'll notice in here that I've got properties. The reason that I put this in place is just to show you the primary reason why I built django-fixtureless, and that is for unit testing. So this is just going to be used in a unit test example. You don't have to worry about it too much. But this kind of just gives you an overall picture of what the data models look like on this website. Very simple. Well, here's the issue. I'm building out this website, and I have all this information about mages and unicorns that I want to display to you. How do I do that exactly without tons of mages and unicorns coming to my not yet built website and giving me their information so that you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of a chicken before the egg type of thing. There's a lot of stuff I want to do and build, but without any data to work against, I really don't have anything I can do to ensure that I'm formatting it correctly or using it correctly. So traditionally, what has been done is they create what they call fixtures. So when you're developing your website or any project whatsoever, you would have a tool that would give you the ability to import just a ton of fake data that you've written by hand in kind of a JSON style format. And what this would look like is something like this. It's really just the model itself, and you define parameters that would fit in this. This one doesn't match the mage unicorn. This is actually a real life example of a fixture. But you can see that here's some information. This one is a lead. This one is a lead information. There's a lot of information that someone has typed in to give you this structure. And so when you're going to test or develop in your development environment, you can load in this information so that you can have something to test against. And that's great, right? Like, you have this information that you can actually use. Well, unfortunately, I added the line numbers here for your benefit. These can get rather lengthy. This example right here is 1,500 lines that someone typed in. And that sucks. That sucks bad. And that sucks bad for a lot of reasons. One, when you're loading in fixtures, when you're doing your tests and your development, that takes a lot of time. There could be megabytes of data that you have to translate and dump to a database in order to actually even begin your development. And that one's not so bad, development, but testing is worse because you want to run unit tests. You want that to be quick and fast because you're about ready to deploy. So if you have to wait 15 minutes to load in a bunch of fixtures, it's really slowing down your process to get the real code out onto the web. Not to mention the worst part. So we realized halfway through that our mages, they also need to have, I don't know, say they're an apprentice of the master mage, and we now need to add that to our mage model. So now we have a mage, and we have a field that we need to add that needs to have a mage master. I have to go through 1,500 lines of fixtures and add fake data around this mage master who doesn't yet exist. So you can see how as the models evolve, and they will, your models are going to evolve, you have to go back through line by line and manually update all these fixtures. If we got rid of high school grad year on this, I have to go through every single fixture and remove that entry. We found this where I work, Neutron Interactive, we found this to be a nightmare. And so we came up with a solution that is the motivation of this talk. That was awesome. Someone blamed that on Ubuntu earlier, and I think I'm going to go with him. So enter Fixtureless. This is the motivation behind why we built Fixtureless. Is essentially we needed a tool that would very quickly and efficiently get fake data and dump it into our database so that we can test and develop locally. It is available through PyPy. About a year and a half ago, I decided to open source this. It has been successful as far as I can tell. I've got about 10,000 users with it right now. You can pip install. If anybody is familiar with Python pip install, you can just pip install it. And it's also available to fork on GitHub. The actual GitHub has a README file with tons and tons of examples, and if you're not super familiar with code, it might be a little bit daunting to look at that because it's just, there's a lot of use cases. It's a factory that is building you a bunch of fake data. And so if you're not really comfortable with code, you may not want to start there. So instead, I decided to make a practical example for the purposes of this. Not everybody's going to be on the same level of code. Some people are not even familiar with MVCs, so for me to assume and create some huge factory examples is a little bit too much. So on GitHub, there is this Openwest 2015 Fixtureless. You're more than welcome to look at it now. It's available for downloading and forking from now and forever. But it's going to have the exact same code that I'm about to go through, the motivation, how to use it, all that kind of stuff. So if you guys are ready, or do you have any questions before we get started on that? No? Okay.
Are you going to cover competitive packages or just
I'd be welcome to discuss that at the end. I know there are some competitive pack like Model Mommy, Factory Boy. I address those problems a little bit differently than they do, and we can if you want. I don't have it in the presentation, but I'm more than happy to talk about it. Yeah. Oh yeah, thanks for playing along, having it started. All right, so like I said, Fixtureless was originally built with the intent for unit testing. Unit testing is not as exciting, but everybody really should do it. It's one of those necessary evils. So I'm going to start with that example, and then we'll move to the more fun development stuff. So we're going to go back to this property that I created. In our code base, we like to mandate unit tests against any custom model method. So essentially, this brothers in arms is a custom model method that I've written In this case, it's really just using the Django ORM. They call that the object relational mapping. It's essentially the way that you can build code with classes to represent the database, and you can do filters through code rather than having to write SQL queries. Just makes it a little easier. Generally, we wouldn't test this because it's really just testing the Django ORM. The Django folks do that testing, not me. So there's really no reason to do this. But to give you an example of how you can use Fixtureless, I've written a unit test here for testing brothers in arms. So the idea is, the first thing I do is I create a factory. The factory is imported from Fixtureless right here. I'm really bad with these little laptop mice, so bear with me. So I'm importing the factory, and then I'm just instantiating the factory on setup of the test, and then I can use that factory throughout. And the GitHub API will explain in full detail all the API stuff if you want. But in this case, what we're going to do is just going to do the simple .create. The .create will generate an actual object, save it into the database for your use at any time. The way the API works is you pass it the object that you're wanting to create, and then this second parameter is actually fairly flexible in what you want to do. And again, the API docs will tell you all about it. But in this case, we're going to pass it a dictionary that specifies the field and the field type, or field value that we want as necessary when we build this this actual model in the API factory, so that everything else is going to be randomly generated by Fixtureless. So in this case, we're going to do the magic type of the mage. We have a few choices. Fixtureless is smart enough to look and say, oh, these are the choices that are available to me. I'll randomly select one. But the name is going to just be random Unicode. I didn't specify any information about that in the building of it. So what I'm doing here is I'm building out a mage with a magic type. Then I'm doing an assertion. Has everybody used unit testing before? Anybody not used unit testing before? Okay, great. Really? Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so proud of everybody. Okay, so everybody can just so I'm asserting here. I'm just going to go ahead and count how many brothers in arms this mage has. Well, he's the only one in existence, so I'm expecting 0. Simple enough, right? Now I'm going to add another mage, but I'm going to give him a different magic type. I'm also going to assert the brothers in arms is 0 because they're not the same magic type, right? So here I'm expecting 0 again. Now I'm going to create a third mage that is of the original magic type, and I'm expecting 1 mage based off of my brothers in arms property, and I'm going to assert that's the same. And surprise, surprise, like I said, I'm pretty much testing the Django ORM. Django's ORM has already been tested, so if I run that test, everything passes. Fantastic. Can you guys see that? Do I need to plus it? Does it say when? Good? Okay. Oh no. Can we shut off the front lights by chance? Anybody know? Let's just give it a shot. That's not them. Oh, that's nothing. Is there, wait, there's one right here. Wait, there we go. Yeah, nice. Okay, so let's try that again. So I kind of squished, but essentially I'm just running in Django, you just run into the manage script is kind of the manager of the command line version of your Django app, and I'm just saying test it. It'll automatically run all the unit tests, and you can see in this case, there's only 1 test in this project. It was all the assertions within that test were successful, so we're all okay. Do you guys have any questions about that? Yeah.
What's the advantage of doing that over just making objects in your database? Maybe I missed something.
That's exactly what the Fixtureless does. Is it creates the objects in the database, but what it does is it randomizes everything for you. So if you have, so in this case, I'm only interested.
About certain parts and it just fills in the
And yes, and if it's not required, it won't include it. It'll do foreign keying, it'll do many to many, it'll do all that handling for you. And
it's like, here's what I care about, go fill in the rest.
yes, yeah.
I might have missed this, but in your model you have the constraints magic choices.
Yes.
Is that defined anywhere?
Yes, it is.
I don't know what the choices are.
I can show you. The actual project, which is that Fixtureless GitHub that I set up, this is all there. But I'm more than happy to show you. I just told you, I'm bad with these little laptop mice. There are my choices. So this one happened to be arcane, black, fire, frost, nature, and white. Those are the magic types that are available for mages on this website. And yes, and fixtureless, if I were not to provide that dictionary that was just highlighted, if I were not to provide that and just give it mage, it would have randomly selected one of those. It's smart enough to know what I'm supposed to use, what I have to use, and what I don't have to use. And it makes all that relationship for you. Any other questions about the unit testing? Like I said, they're not the most exciting part of development, so I'm happy to move on to the actual development purposes of this if you would like, but I will spend more time. No? Okay. So on to the development side. So what I decided was, a lot of times when you're developing things, you want a little bit of data to kind of play with and see how things are going to work out. And Fixtureless, of course, can give you that functionality very easily. But I wanted to give you an actual example where the amount of data can change the behavior of the actual website. So what I'm doing here as a demonstration is you have a website that is a single page. It's super simple. The point of it, this is not how to build websites, but the page will show you information about every mage in the system. So it's going to show you their name, their magic type, and all the unicorns that they have as friends. Well, you can imagine that as you're building out your website, that much information can get daunting if you have a lot of mages and unicorns in your database. So keeping that in mind, I've built this view, and again, the details of the view are not as important. You're more than welcome to follow along with it, but class-based views, who uses class-based views in Django's solely? Like, you do not even use method-based views. You and I are friends. This is the get method. This is essentially the dispatch type you can define with class-based views to handle that, and it does all the dispatching for you. It's pretty awesome. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm just grabbing all the mages in the system. I'm creating a context of just data against all that information, and then I'm rendering that out to the template. So this is the MVC concept. This is the view that's collecting the data from the model, and it's going to be passing it through the controller out to the user to see. But you'll notice here I'm calling out to this get context, because that get context I've defined. I'm going to actually custom look at it and see how much context I should be giving back, because if there's too much information, I don't know how to display that properly. So you can follow along in the code, but essentially up here, I have these little limits that I've defined. I believe I've defined them at, and I messed that up, 15 and 50. So just arbitrarily for the purposes of this, I said if there's more than 15 mages in the system, let's go ahead and reduce the amount of content we send back. If there's more than 50 mages in the system, I'm going to reduce it a little further. And the details are what I'm getting are here in the view. But the template itself, let's look at the template just to see. This is an example of the MVC. Django uses Jinja as a templating engine, and what that allows us to do is this little syntax here with the double curly braces allows us to pass in variables from the view. This context that I passed in from the get is coming in through as what we call data. So here is some Jinja magic saying, I'm going to extract information from data in this way. I'm calling it mage info for the purposes of this loop. And every time I see mage info is where I'm actually using that. And you can see it's just a dictionary type, and I'm just pulling it out and looping through all that stuff. So from this, I'm able to actually create the actual web page. So again, just to show again, so this data here corresponds to this name data there. So before we move on, do we have any other questions about views or what I'm doing here to kind of motivate the next step? No? Okay. So the next step is to actually now use Fixtureless to generate some content for us to look at on our web page. So I've already got it going. There's a run server. It's just mages. There's no mages in the system right now. It's blank, it's empty, it's bare. I'm going to add some mages. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to a management script that I wrote, and this is going to show you an example of, before I move into that. Django management scripts are essentially a built-in way that you can run scripts through Django to take advantage of all of the environment variables and the built-in libraries of Django. So it's essentially just a Python script that you're running through Django's magic. The details of the options aren't really necessary. It's allowing me to determine whether or not I want to use custom values or the Django's or the fixtureless's random, Unicode or numbers. The numbers in fixtureless will provide you any value from 0 to the max size. So obviously that can get out of hand. So if you don't provide it ranges, for visual purposes, it might be a little bit daunting. It will also allow you to select manual, mage, and unicorn counts. It will give you defaults if not specified. And then I've also put in a simple clear DB. So if you want to, start over from fresh, you can just clear the DB. And down here in the handle is where it actually extracts the information from your options. Yes. No, this is really simple. Let me get back to that because we'll get to that. The options that you selected in the command line are extracted here and then used when you want to actually generate the mages and the unicorns. And this is the code that I'm using to do everything to generate for this development example. And again, I brought the model over here just so you can refer back to it if you've forgotten what it looks like exactly. So let's go back here, and I'm going to add some mages and unicorns. So just to start, I'm going to add 15 mages. The number of unicorns is pretty arbitrary in my example, so we're just going to add 200. So what this is about to do is go through at runtime, inspect your data models, determine what's required, what's not required, what relationships exist, foreign keys, many-to-manys, that kind of stuff. Generate the field type, random values, ranges, all that kind of stuff. And it's going to be doing it for 200 unicorn models, and 15 mage models. Now, like you remember the fixtures that I showed you, all that. Can you imagine typing out 200 unicorn? Yeah. So just started and it's done. So that's how fast it can generate it, and you can see how using this in your unit testing can be extremely beneficial. So let's see what happens with my website. Everything worked, yay. So here's my mage list. This is his name, which is fantastic. If anyone can pronounce that, let's talk after. Here's a unicorn. He's fairly old, looks like. Can you guys all, let me plus this a little bit. So here's my unicorn who's, he's getting up there in age. The magic type is fired because it did select that from a random preset list, so I don't expect that one to be a little bit crazy. But all the rest of the stuff is, to me, is exactly what I expected. This is just random Unicode data that it dumped in, right? For testing, that's great, right? When we ran the test, we weren't interested in what it looked like, the name and all that stuff, so it didn't matter what was dumped in. But for development purposes, that is kind of meaningless. Like, this isn't going to give you anything for the user experience, so we're going to go ahead and reel it back in and have the management script actually go from a preset list. And this is going to address your use custom. So the use custom will actually force the names, and in this case, it was really the names that were getting out of control. But I did also limit the ages just for visually to be between 1 and 50. If you guys are happy with 54 million-year-old unicorns, you could remove that line entirely. But this right here, I decided were the preset names that I was going to choose from, and that information, that for the development purposes, that information should be more than enough. Yeah.
Can you restrict your random stuff to like the more method fix them? I would say that more fix some character sets that people don't freak out over.
So let's take an aside for a moment. So just let me reiterate, this one is going to be selecting from these presets. However, as suggested as a possible option to look for these popular lorem ipsums, or maybe just ASCII specific or something like that. As of right now, no, because this was written entirely for the purposes of unit testing, and as it has evolved, I have found more and more people using it. Unfortunately, more people using it more for development testing than actual unit testing. A little bit to my dismay, but hey, if people are using it, great. This, and I should mention with this is only in support of Django 1.7. Unfortunately, my wife and I moved recently. I haven't had time to update to 1.8 because they redid the entire API for this introspection that I'm doing against models real time. All different. I basically have to rewrite a lot of this. So I haven't yet done that. But what I'm going to be doing with that option is I'm going to allow people to pass in the generators that they want. So if they want to do from strings.ascii, you can pass that in, and that will select it. So you can pass that in when you generate your factory. But as of right now, no, again. But that is coming, and I'm very excited about that. I'm actually working with a friend of mine on updating the API to allow for a lot more customization when you're generating the factory. But yeah, so this case is using these names. Of course, you can't have a unicorn without Charlie. Fun stuff. And so I'm just going to rerun the same thing, but this time I'm actually going to say use custom. Let me plus that a little bit. Is that big enough? Yeah? Okay. So it's just simple command line inputs there, and I'm just going to say use custom this time. So what this generator does, you'll see here the first thing that it does when it inits is it deletes everything in the. So this is again for development purposes only. Every time I run this management script, it's going to delete everything that's already there and regenerate everything new. So if you are doing lots and lots of data just to see how big you can make your machine, like how hard you can make your machine work, you're going to have to delete everything you did previously to rebuild it. But all right, so there I go. I created another 15 mages and 200 unicorns from scratch, and now. That's a little better, I suppose, right? So here's my mage Henry, and here are his unicorn friends, and then there's Ashley and her unicorn friends. It's pretty much the same information, but in far more readable format, so that you can actually now design some front-end UI experience around the data that you've presented. And of course, this essentially was this if self use custom, or just generate it. And I'm passing in a count. And if you wanted to just generate the random data, that's all you need to do. You can pass in 1,000, 1,000,000, whatever, and it will just generate that many of them with one line of code. If you want to do a little bit more trickiness and get these little custom name sets, there is a little bit of work to be done. But essentially what you're doing is you're building up a dictionary as a list of dictionaries, where each dictionary represents the new mage you're going to be making. So if I have a list here of 100 dictionaries, it's going to generate 100 mages, each mage unique to that dictionary that you passed in for that index, if that makes sense. So we looked at the use case of the 15 mages and how much data can be shown with that and how it would be shown. But again, like even 15 mages with that many unicorns is kind of unwieldy. There's just too much there. So we're going to back that down a little bit by increasing the number of mages, if that makes sense. So this time, let's make 35 mages. And this is where the view, remember, will make the decision that, oh, this was just too much content. I'm going to reduce the amount of content given back based off of this count. So it regenerated all that. And that's what it looks like now. So now it basically says, all right, when we've got this many mages, we can't know all the information about the unicorn friends. So we're just going to display the mage and the magic type. I am by no means a front-end developer. So if you guys don't like Bootstrap and the simpleness that I've provided here, I apologize. So that's really all it's showing now based off of that view. And then if I wanted to create more content, let's throw a bigger number. How many mages do you guys want to see?
1,000.
1,000 mages. So let's just to see how Fixtureless handles 1,000 mages. And do you want more unicorns too? Yeah, like 25,000? I don't know. That's a lot. I don't know how, honestly, might take up the rest of the time. I don't know. So here we go. 25,000 unicorns and 1,000 mages. So Fixtureless at this point is, of course, we're creating the mage objects, and then it's also creating the unicorn objects. But then it realizes that a unicorn must have a mage friend. So it's inspecting each one of those unicorns that are created and trying to find a mage friend for them to be associated with. Now I could have in the management script specified, oh yeah, this unicorn is going to be mage friends with this guy, right? But in the case that I just provided no information about that, Fixtureless is going to intelligently try and find a mage friend to associate him with. It actually does that just by the most recently created of that object type if none is given. If none exists, it will create one so that you can have it. While this is building, I'm going to take this opportunity to go to the Fixtureless.
Is that the destructive script whenever it runs? So you
Yes. Yeah, in the init, it will, I'll show you that right here. It gets all the mages and unicorns, deletes them, and then rebuilds from scratch. Yes. So this is the Django-fixtureless actual GitHub, and I version control it. I've got full unit tests for it. You can actually pull it down, run unit tests yourself, and if anybody's interested in contributing, I very much appreciate the help. It's not simple. Even this, I mean, it's just a lightweight open source. Like, this is no Red Hat, right? Like, this is just the simplest little open source project, but it has taken me so many hours and so much time, and when I am able to get somebody to contribute, that is more than appreciated. There is support for Postgres, SQLite, and MySQL. Unfortunately, MySQL is 2.7 only. Everything else is 2 and 3 compatible fully. I would like to update that, but the libraries that I was using for MySQL do not support 3 just yet. It also, and this is available upon request. There are a lot of third-party applications that provide custom Django field types, and I will build support for those. And with the API changes that I'm going to be making, you can, at the time of building the factory, specify that type of information. But if you want it built into Fixtureless, I'm more than happy to throw it in, as long as it's something that is generally supported. Like, I'm not, if you're like, yeah, I've got this project that's got this really cool tool, or, you know, I don't even, date range time something field type, can you throw it in there? I might be a little bit hesitant to support something so custom, but if there is an actual, like, I don't know if anybody's used the Django time zone field, but that is an actual legitimate app, open source project. It has support, all that. I'm more than happy to put them in. Down here to the API definition, this is where I was saying it got a little bit, I don't want to get a little bit too much into details, but it will provide you with use cases for pretty much everything, as far as going down to the simplest. Here's my model, here's my count, here's the initial, here's an example of a model, and there's the trivial use case, just much like I had in that management script. And it will go through everything the factory supports, all the way down to some very elaborate builds of multiple models within. You can pass in multiple argument sets into the factory, and it can handle all that kind of stuff. So if you want to just build out dozens and dozens of these different model types and dozens of each one, it can handle that with one call as well. So, and we're still not done. 25,000 is a lot, apparently. Shame on me for allowing such a large set. And then, again, while we're waiting, I'm just going to pull up. This is the GitHub repository for this website that we're actually looking at right now. Again, it's going to be freely available for anybody forever. I'm never going to take this down. And it has, so I am a Linux guy. I don't do Windows at all, and I don't know Macs at all. So that's my disclaimer. But turns out I have friends. So here's a step-by-step of how to install. So for anybody who's not even, not familiar with Django at all, there's a step-by-step of how to install and run this website exactly as I'm showing it right here. Hey, it finished. let's update. So it basically just takes away the magic type. So we're going to have a list of 1,000 mages here, and I'll let you guys scroll through that in your leisure. You get the idea. So back to this. Step-by-step instructions of exactly how to set up this project using a virtual environment. Does anybody not use virtual environments? Do you have?
I know how to use them.
Okay, I know you know your stuff. All right. Well, if you don't use them, generally, if you let's just, how do I say this without? I'm going to say it anyway. If you don't use them, you're bad, and you should feel bad. It's essentially just a way of modularizing your Python environment. So, this is going to require that you do a pip install of django-fixtureless. That's a requirement for this example, of course. Well, you may not want fixtureless running on your entire machine. So we create a virtual environment with, it's not like it's hard. You do those 2 commands to install it, and this is how you make your virtual environment. That was that hard, right? So boom, now I have a virtual environment, and then anything I install in that virtual environment is contained entirely within that virtual environment and is not going to clutter the rest of your code or anything else on your computer. So you should use those as often as you can. But like I said, here's just a step-by-step of the entire process. And of course, my numbering is horrible because I go from 6 to 1 again. But then this is where my friends are useful. Well, not only, but they're useful for this case anyway. Someone helped me with OXX, and this is a full install. It doesn't go through the full details. If you don't have Xcode, you are going to have to figure out that. But they do. It does assume that you have the Xcode that you've downloaded from the Apple Store and then installed. It goes through a little bit more setup. Apparently, Macs are a little bit more fickle about making sure everything's going to work together and behave nicely. But a lot of the commands, again, I'm so bad with these little laptop mice. A lot of the commands you're going to notice are very similar, if not the same, throughout. And if you follow this step by step, the last step, of course, is just setting up the run server, or starting the run server here, and then opening up to your browser to whatever the run server is set up as, and you'll see that page. So it's all there, it's all available. I hope everybody will take advantage, download it, and step through it. I'm pretty much done with what I wanted to show you, but I'd like to open it up for general discussions, maybe of some competing ideas around how to handle fixtureless type of stuff, or any other Django.
Yeah, more what I was looking for is just maybe a few names of some other packages that do similar things, but why yours, how does yours stand out?
Okay.
Why did you create it in the first place based on the fact that other things existed that did something similar?
Sure.
Specifically for the Django environment.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. Like, why reinvent the wheel? Right. The motivation behind Fixtureless was, of course, to create a fixtureless way of doing unit testing. That was where I started. And when I built this, nothing existed. Since then, there have been some other players in the market. There was a very early one that I found out about very soon after I created Fixtureless called Factory Boy. Factory Boy is it's a similar concept. You are allowed to generate your models through a factory. However, I found it to be far more invasive because you actually have to define a Factory Boy attribute within the model of Django. So in my code, in this guy here, if I had Factory Boy, I would have to say, like, I think factory support or something. There was some keyword here that I would have to provide some, the Factory Boy something or other. And I didn't like that. I didn't like having to actually modify my code base to support something that is going to inspect my code.
And did they do that just because they knew the introspection from Django and not allowed them to avoid that?
I highly doubt that they saw that coming, because that was, if they did, they're really cool, because that's 3 years out. Like Fixtureless has been around for almost 3 years, and if they saw the API changes coming in 1.8 back at the first launch of 1.4, then I need to start be friends. Yeah, and I think that was more of the case, is that they didn't want to have to crawl through introspection to determine it. And I mean, I'm more than happy to show you the.
No,
the code. There is, however, a competitor that's more likened to the way that I do it, and that's called Model Mommy. I'm not very familiar with Model Mommy. I have tried Factory Boy a little bit, and like I said, I just didn't like the way it was so intrusive to my code. Model Mommy, I guess, is also an inspect at runtime solution, but again, I'm not very familiar with it. But Factory here will actually, you'll notice, if you guys, has anybody done introspection in Python? Is anyone interested and may not know how to do introspection in Python? Not who just doesn't even care about introspection? Like, it's dumb. Only fools use it. Does anybody not know what introspection is? Maybe I should have started there. So in case you didn't know and you just didn't want to raise your hand, introspection is essentially saying, I'm going to, at runtime, figure out what I am and change what I do based on that. And I mean, that's kind of what code does in general, is it looks at values of variables along the way. But this is even more a step further than that. It's saying, what is the object that is running right now? What type of object is it? And based off of that information, I'm going to make decisions so that the code changes drastically in behavior based off of who the actual memory type that's running the code. This right here is a very simple example of some basic introspection. This is instance method. It's a built-in, and it's basically just looking at the second argument and determining if that type is an integer type. And if it is, it's going to do this. If it's not, instead is a list or tuple, then it's going to do this. If instead it's a dictionary, it's going to do this. That's a very, very basic low-level or high-level version of low-level introspection. It's very simple introspection. And as I go further into, I'm not going to be able to get to it here. This is where the fun introspection occurs. And so if you guys, like I said, if you want to just, if you're not really comfortable with introspection, or you are comfortable and just like looking at it because it is fun, this is a great place to look at some introspection. So I have to look at the instance type with the class and determine from that meta information about related models, field types, so I know what type of data to generate. And you can follow this through, and here are the generators for each of the different types. This is not overwhelmingly complicated. I'm like, oh, an image field. Well, I know an image field in Django is just a child class of character field, so I'm just going to generate character, because it's really essentially just saving the path to the image. So that's not anything great. But when I actually want to create character sets, I'm choosing, from these specific ones I've got defined up here. Did I put sorry. I'm not going to find it, and this is, well, essentially I'm getting like ASCII sets or Unicode sets and stuff, and that's how I'm just randomly picking between them. For like, this is a decimal field. For a decimal type, I'm just creating some specific integer and fractional part and sticking them together. There's really nothing super complicated about this. The only thing that I would say is moderately complicated is the introspection down here, figuring out the instance type, what it's related to, those instance types, all the fields for those instance types, all the fields for myself, and having to figure that out on the fly is a little bit special. But do you guys have any other questions about Fixtureless or Django or web development? Anything? Code, databases? Yeah.
I'd like to hear your perspective on why you don't have virtual environments. It was you. Okay, sorry. Okay.
Clint.
Hi. So my point of view on virtual environments is really not that it's a bad thing necessarily. I live as a sysadmin, so a lot of times I do things and I want to make sure work on the systems. Whereas creating an environment and setting up things like Apache, work with it, and Mvc and all the things that involved with that, it's just really not worth the effort. As a developer, I don't think it's a problem necessarily. So, but one of the things I do, and I've been struggling with for a really long time, and my talk actually next talks about packaging a little bit, is packaging and how you manage that. And one of the things that Virtualenv does gives you is like including set packages, the operating system packages if you want, versus not including extent where we have this, we want it to be stable, but we want it to be also flexible and easy to update. So there's kind of a trick there. So in terms of the virtual environment, it's really difficult to do that when you have an operating system that already has this in place. But beyond that, the developers.
Yeah, it's the right tool for the job. I mean, I have at any one time about 5 different conflicting projects that I have to work on all together.
And switching between them sucks.
And yeah, so I mean, unless I'm going to spin up like a Vagrant, use Vagrant to spin up a VM, how am I going to keep these separated? But I'm a developer. I'm not the systems guy. If you were to talk to,
Docker or anything,
yeah,
you got to way to pull it all in and get it managed, and so you've got to have like an environment to do that. And virtual is just another way. And
Yeah.
there's just so many options.
yeah, that really is.
It causes pain sometimes.
So, any other questions? No? All right. Thanks, guys. Oh, wait. Oh. I will be chastised if I do not. So, I'd like to thank you guys for coming and listening. I hope you had fun. I hope it was informational. Again, my name is Rico Cordova. I love talking nerd, so if you ever want to email me with anything, I do code reviews. I'll do whatever. You can fork my stuff. I'll fork your stuff in the very GitHub way of that word. This is me on GitHub, Rico Moss. That's kind of my online handle. It turns out Rico is always taken. So Fixtureless, this actual example, and then if you can go into the join.in and leave a comment, I love the feedback. I do presentations all the time, so anything that you guys like, oh, he mumbled, he said the word too much, he was just awkward to look at, whatever, I would appreciate any feedback I can get. And then Twitter, I'm not huge into social media, I'm trying, but Lord help me, I'm just not a narcissist. So that's my Twitter handle, and I will try to keep up with that. So hope you guys are enjoying the time. Thank you very much.